Welcome, everybody, to the Get Ready webinar for our brand new Easter season series called Resurrection Stories. Oh, friends, I'm very excited for you to experience this, for you to do this. Resurrection Stories has been a DIY series, we call it, in the Worship Design Studio, which are ideas for series, but they're not fully scripted. They just have lots and lots of ideas. And we decided to make it fully scripted because so many people have commented about how the theme really struck them and wanted us to help provide those resurrection stories that would help jumpstart sort of the testimonials of the people in your congregations themselves and their own resurrection stories, their own turnaround stories. So today we're going to be you're going to get a look-see inside of it, so you can determine whether this is right for your congregation this year. It is non-lectionary. We do have a year B lectionary series, which is the year we're in right now, and ANC. So we decided we would do this one non-lectionary since you have those others at your disposal if you are if you're following the lectionary religiously, as we say. But this one does actually utilize all of the post-resurrection stories of Jesus after his resurrection showing up to the disciples. So it uses all of those, but it uses some other scriptures as well to help us along this journey of talking about our own resurrection, the possibility for new life. So let's get started, friends. I'm going to share with you some images, and so you can get a look-see at the back end of what all this is and know what it is that you are signing up for. All right, so in theological themes for the Easter season, we have many theological themes, but the most prominent ones, resurrection, of course, ascension toward the end of that season, the sending of the Spirit. So the Easter season, sometimes we forget that Easter's not just a day, it's not just a Sunday, but it is a week of weeks. It is the great 50 days. And so we have resurrection, Easter Sunday at the beginning of it, we have several weeks, and then we have Ascension Sunday right before Pentecost, the sending of the Spirit. It's a season of joy, of alleluias. Believe, right? See what you believe. And what we can see about resurrection is that, even in the springtime, we have this evidence that death is not the last word, that things regenerate. And so this whole series is about that regeneration. Living as Easter people, death has no hold. What would it be like if we really believed that we were capable of coming up out of what feels like death in our lives into new life? Great spiritual harvest, the post-resurrection appearances, the presence of Christ in and among the community, even now, and affirmations of faith. The Easter season was the third for the early church, third season that was par excellence for training, for educating those catechumens, getting them ready for their baptism on Pentecost Sunday. So that was another favorite Sunday for baptisms for the early church. Okay, friends, so as I teach the liturgical year, I teach the theological themes that come out of Scripture, out of our faith narrative, but I also teach that the liturgical year is a wonderful way to mine the depths of human yearning. And so the human yearning that I see in Easter and the Easter season as a whole is that yearning for purpose, right? Renewing our belief that we have a purpose, a reason for living, renewal of new life in the midst of death, for starting again. And friends, I think each one of us has seasons where we really need to hear that message. I know that personally, and I bet you know that personally as well. And so guaranteed, there are people in our congregations every year that need to hear that message, that new life is possible, that this is part of what we understand and believe as Christians, that new life out of the midst of death, that starting over, do-overs are possible, right? Okay, so we have several fully scripted series at your disposal. As I said, Dare to Dance Again is that year B. Heart of the Matter is year A. Emerge, I think, is year C. Resurrections Stories then is a non-lectionary, as is Roll Down Justice. So many things to choose from out of our library, but today we're going to focus on Resurrection Stories, which is our brand new, fully scripted, hot off the press. Okay, so I'm going to play for you this trailer, very short trailer, and it will give you, the trailers that we do help you and your congregation. You get this in your downloads. You can put your church's information on the end of it, and you can use that on social media, use it on your website. You are also going to, in this trailer, hear the theme song by Amanda Udis Kessler. So let's take a look.
Rise up in us, and we will rise from death into a newfound life, from bondage freed, from harm released, from illness healed as one in peace. When all is lost, our hearts are warmed, our hope restored, our lives transformed. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah.
So images of doors opening, and that is our anchor image, those keys. All right, so the main scripture, or sort of the thematic scripture, is I am the resurrection and the life. Those who believe in me, even though they die, will live. And everyone who lives and believes in me will never die. From John, the Gospel of John. The heart of the message, the synopsis, the series synopsis. This is the heart of the message. Synopses are something that in my book, Think Like a Filmmaker, I learned from filmmakers, and that is to give people a really concrete, this is the main thing, this is the main goal and message of the series. And when you put that on your website, when you put that out there as invitations, whether that's postcards or newsletters or whatever it is, people see that and they say, yeah, I need to hear that. And perhaps that will be motivation and invitation for them to come. So the Easter season is a time of celebrating all the ways in which resurrection is possible in our lives. We can be in need of rising out of the depth of imprisonment, addiction, poverty, illness, and oppression, not just physically and literally, but also spiritually. What keeps us locked up inside? What holds us back from the joy of life? What binds us, keeping us from the fullness of who God created us to be? Join us for powerful testimonies of courage, kindness, strength, and overcoming. Resurrection stories from those who have found resurrection in their lives. It might just inspire you to unlock your own rising up. And people, we need those who have been re-inspired for their work of good in the world. Each one of us has those low points, and we need that new life, that new breath, that rising up once again. All right, so these are the titles of the various services. Raised is the Easter Sunday service, and there's a full service in there. So there's also an Easter addendum. And what I mean by this is if you are doing a Lent series and the Lent series has an Easter service that you really want to do as the culmination of that Lenten journey, then do that. And then I have written a little introduction inviting people at the end of this, whatever service you're doing on Easter, to this theme, right? It's just a paragraph, and you may want to hand out at that time keys with some sort of message on it so that that will be a reminder to them, this is the message that's happening at this church for the next 7 weeks. And so perhaps they'll come back. This is the important thing to remember about Easter Sunday is that if you have more people on Easter Sunday than you do other weeks, then the invitation about what's next is super important, right? So either you begin the whole journey on Easter and then invite people back for the rest of the journey, or you do whatever journey you're doing ends on Easter from Lent, and then you, at the end of the service, give them a little teaser, right? Maybe play that little, it's less than a minute long, video of the trailer so that people are invited to come back and go on this journey with you. The other names: freed, released, found, healed, liberated, calmed, and then Pentecost is transformed. All right, so the anchor image in the Worship Design Studio, if you're not familiar with this, we have an anchor image, a visual metaphor, visual tangible metaphor that helps anchor us in the message. You know, what we know from cognitive scientists is that big concepts, are less memorable if we don't have something visual and tangible to come alongside and help us really interpret in a very quick way what it is that we're doing. And so this is the key to unlock our own resurrection. The whole package includes scripts and auxiliary documents, and I'm going to go through these in this Get Ready webinar with everything you need. But super important, those of you who've done our series before know we want you to adapt for your context. So we have tons of ideas in there, and it may not be that you do every one of them. And so towards the end of this webinar, I'm going to show you how you might make decisions around adapting this for your place. Now, if you are not a subscriber, you know, everything that we do, everything that comes out, all the past years are available to our subscribers, our yearly subscribers. But some people purchase these things a la carte. So you can do that at worshipdesignstudio.com/stories. All right. So that's where you can get just this one. Okay. So in the downloads, here's what's included and what to do with it. This is in our overview document. And on that /stories, if you're not a member, a subscriber, then you can go to that website, to that landing page, and you can actually get a glance, click on the button that says overview, and you can read all of that, much more information. You can see the scriptures and synopses for every week, and you can see an example script like I'm going to show you towards the end of our webinar today. So the overview, it's a great thing for your team, the people who helped you. And I know some of you are going, I don't have a team. Well, you have some people, even the people who might be threading some messages on some keys to get ready to give people. They are part of your team, right? So everybody has a team, no matter how small your church is. Scriptures and synopses, this is the document that shows you at a glance what is the journey, the scriptural journey, the theological journey we're going through, so you can get a sense of the whole. 8 worship scripts plus that addendum that I talked about, and we're going to go over a script and I can show you how to adapt that. Children's time scripts, so you put this in the hands of the folks who lead your children's time and they can prepare for it. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about that in a moment. Communion script, so on those weeks when you have communion, you can insert this into the script. And if you are a denomination that does communion every week, then you can use that as a basis and then tweak it so that it's a little bit different based on each week's theme. So that is there for you to get jump started on that. Sermon fodder, of course, and I'll tell you more about that in each of the sermon fodder for this series. We have actually chosen a news story about someone who is a resurrection story, who turned their life around. And so we'll, in the sermon fodder, we have a link to that story. We have written a synopsis of that story. And then we have talked about how you can relate that to all of the scripture selections. Visual and media ideas, that's as usual, a whole document. We'll see that in a moment. The music document and files for our original song, theme song, as well as some music for our offertory doxology. Logo, trailer, social media posts, small group suggestions. We're going to go through all of this. So that's what's in the package in one fell swoop. All right, this is inside the Worship Design Studio. And when you are a subscriber or you purchase that a la carte, you're going to be in here. And so over here on the left, we have a list of all of our series, and there's Resurrection Stories at the top of the Easter season series list, since it's the newest. And you also can download the entire series by clicking on that link, and it'll give you the link to our file sharing program called Hightail, which looks like this. When you click that link, you're going to go to something that looks like this. You do not have to create an account to download anything. You just download. And the way you do that is by clicking on that download arrow right there, and it will just dump all of these files right onto your computer. Or you can do them one at a time. If you don't want all of that, if you're a visual arts person that is just coming to get that, you can just download that, or you can download that from inside the Worship Design Studio as well. But this is the way to quickly just get it all on your computer. When you do that, it's going to ask you, do you want the current version of the files? Just say download. Yes, of course. And when it comes onto your computer, it's going to look like this. We've numbered them, hopefully in a way that will help order them. And you will also see that our music files are in zip files, which means you just double click or right click on those, and it opens up where you see this recordings. That's an example. It'll open up the files that way. All right. As always, if you have any trouble, you just contact us at marcia@marciamcfee.com, and we can help you through it. Okay. So let's begin looking at the different documents. Sermon fodder. All right, as I said, each Sunday comes with a resurrection story. Let me take you through what these stories are. Adam is a story, a CBS producer. Now, I got the idea to scan the CBS files because I love CBS Sunday mornings. I record it. It is one of those news magazine shows that is just so uplifting, and it has such great stories in it. So we began to look all through there for news stories that would be great stories. So the first one here is actually of somebody who works at CBS mornings, and he was attacked on the street in New York City where he lives and went through some major PTSD about just going out of his house. And he talks, he put this piece together, and he talks about how he was able to move slowly into new life, into a new sense of safety and who he was, and even a new sense of joy in his life. So that is one that we have assigned to Easter. Now, if you're not doing Easter, then you will move that perhaps to Pentecost, because Pentecost could be just a culmination of all the stories, or you could move this one to Pentecost if you're not doing Easter. Now, each one of these stories is also featured in our devotional booklet. So people can actually go watch that, the full video, and there are some journal prompts, and you can use that as small group fodder. I'm going to get to that, but that's Adam. The next week is Jelly Roll. He's a musician that was in prison. He wrote songs in prison, and now this year he was nominated, I think, for 3 Grammy Awards. And so this is a story about his sense of redemption, his sense of resurrection, from being in a lifestyle that kept him in prison a lot to a way of sharing his resurrection with others, and how he goes back to prisons and talks to people. So a wonderful, wonderful story. Ron is somebody who was addicted heavily, and now mentors folks in recovery. And so that is a short little story, but a beautiful one. Again, talking about how someone came from something that was locking them up inside, keeping them from a full life, and how they've turned that around. In the next week, we have a piece from the New York Times, a video montage of people talking about loneliness. This has become a big deal in our day. I think it's always been a big deal with humanity, but certain things, especially post-pandemic, have created situations where people are isolated. And so this is a wonderful montage of people talking about loneliness, and then saying some things about how connection can help create a resurrected sense of belonging. And so that's a really powerful one, with lots of different people testifying on that one. Senator John Fetterman, as many of you know, had a stroke, and in his rehabilitation from the stroke has several disabilities, and also some severe depression came from it. And most people don't know that one of the #1 side effects of a stroke is depression. So it's a powerful story. And it's on our week that's called healed, but it's not necessarily that he was healed from his physical ailments, but how he learns to cope in positive ways, how he has learned to use a device to help him, to help his brain to understand what people are saying to him in a more quick way. And it's just an example of someone who was dealt a lot of pain and under a lot of pressure in the very much in the public eye. So no matter your political leanings, this is a guy who can really help us understand and have empathy for those who are going through what he went through, what he is going through, and what healing means, more than just a healing of the ailment, but a healing of the spirit. All right, another story that we have is of Z, who was an Afghan military translator and was able to get to this country, but his visa is being denied, and he knows that he will be killed and his family will be killed if he goes back. And he settled in the city of Iowa Falls in Iowa. And this is a news story about how that community has rallied around him. A small rural community rallied around this Afghan man. And so it is about that connection and what a difference we can all make in our support of one another in terms of community, in the liberation of all of us. So in that story, you don't just hear about his need for liberation, but you hear how the folks in the town are liberated as well in their connection with him and support of him. And then there is a story about a group of children and teens who created a way to express how important it is to deal with mental health issues in young people. And I get verklempt because I know what all these stories are. So I'm sitting here like, oh my gosh, when you see these, you're just not going to believe it. Um, so that is in the service called Calmed. And it is just about that incredible way that these teens found a way through their own struggles and now are playing that forward and how that's part of their resurrection story. So friends, these are the resurrection stories that we have gathered for you. Now, as you think about how you're going to use these, if you are not live streaming online or posted recording things, you could use these in your worship and watch them or watch bits of them. They range from 3 minutes to 8 minutes. So just depending on what you want to do. But I would say if you're live streaming or posting recorded, you might just want to use the paragraphs that we put in the sermon fodder to help you describe them, and then invite people to watch that. There are links and QR codes in that devotional journal that you can give to people. It's just a one-pager that you could print out and give to people so they could watch it at home. Use it in small group gatherings, watch it together, and then discuss it. So many ways to do that. The other thing that I want to encourage you to do is to think about your own resurrection stories in your own communities. So it may be that you talk about these stories, but you also begin to think about, before the Easter season starts, who in our community has an inspirational story that would be willing to offer their story, and do a short little video with them beforehand, or do a dialogue sermon with them, or invite them to come tell their story in a testimony. Maybe this whole series, you just do bookends. Your sermon is just a bookend to somebody's testimony. Maybe that's the way you do it. There are many different ways to do this. So what we want to do is encourage people to see resurrection as something that's not just a story about Jesus, not just a narrative of our faith, but as an actuality in our lives now. And how can we experience that renewal of life? Okay, so sermon folks who are going to be preaching this, as you know, in the Worship Design Studio website, we have started to do sermon discussions. And so you click on highlighted hashtags, you see the sermon discussions right there. You click on that and it's going to bring up all of the sermon discussions once the series begins. I also want to tell you that we are going to try something new with resurrection stories, because we have seen that many of you want to get together and have Zoom discussions each week as you're preparing your sermons. So we want to remind you that we have something called the virtual studio, that 24/7 you can come on and have a video conference with each other just by going to our link. You don't have to schedule a Zoom. You can just say, okay, meet me in the virtual studio at whatever time. You can organize that on your own. I'm going to play this little video that Jenna and I made to show you, remind you, and show you if you've never been in there. It's a fun little vintage looking platform, and this is how it works. So here we are, Jenna and I, in the virtual studio, and our little avatars move around, Jenna, so we can, let's, why is my, wait, oh, I'm not on there. Okay. We can move around. And so you see when we get further away, we disappear, but when we're close together, we can see each other's video. Now you can also click on this little arrow thing up in the corner and make videos bigger, so it's more like a Zoom, right? And everybody who's clumped together can see each other and talk to each other. So, Jenna, let's go to the Resurrection Stories place where we can brainstorm. So we're going to go up to this picnic table. So whenever we're inside this picnic table, you can see that it kind of highlights. And that means that you're in a private space. So you can be anywhere in that little highlighted area and still see the people who are in that area. So you could put several avatars there. So if many of you show up for a sermon preparation brainstorming time, then you would see everybody. And again, click those arrows to make your video bigger or smaller. Okay, so on the table here at Resurrection Stories, you will see that there are a couple of documents, and when you get close to the document, it highlights yellow. It says press X to interact, and when you do that, what happens is that this one is the sermon fodder document. It comes up, so you don't have to leave the space to go look at it. You can look at it right there. Now, do know, I just tried this out, that if you click any link in this, it's going to take you out of the virtual studio and open that link in the same window. I think that's a design flaw in the program. I think that it should open up in a different tab. But anyway, just know that that's happened. So like if you go to watch the video of the resurrection story in this one, it's going to take you out. You're going to disappear. But then you can come back just by doing the back button. But you might want to watch those outside of but at least you can access the sermon fodder. The other thing on the table, if we come up here to the, here, and you press X, that's the scriptures and synopses. So that's just the short version of what scriptures are happening that week and what the synopsis is. Okay, so you can have your own little sermon discussion group here if you'd like. Yay! Good to see you here in the virtual studio, Jenna.
Good to see you, Marcia.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Okay, so that's fun, right? And it's a place where you don't have to like send anybody a link for a specific Zoom thing. You can just show up. And so we're going to try to facilitate that this time. All right, let me do children's time, and then I'll pause and see if we have questions before I move on to visual and music. All right, so children's time document has all of the scripts for each Sunday. And we have this thing where we suggest that you make a big box, and we have a video to show you how this guy did it, a kind of a door in a box, and then make a big key that you can open the door every Sunday, and there is something different inside there for the scripts. Now, because the concept of resurrection is a little bit probably too big of a concept to focus on for 8 weeks for children, what we're focusing on is things that regenerate in spring, right? So everything that kind of wakes up or rejuvenates or that kind of thing. And that idea of new life happening related to spring. And so that's really what each week is about. And we use different ways that happens. But suffice it to say, we have written out scripts. My suggestion is always to give this to the folks who are going to do your children's time, or if it's you, read through it, get the main points, and then put the script aside and just do it in your own words, right? But we do have it written out if that's a really helpful thing for you. Now, just know that I made up a little thing at the end that gets repeated like most of our children's times. And this is different ways to say Alleluia because it's the Easter season and it's a season of Alleluia. So we have, oh yeah. And at first you're going to have them, repeating it back and forth, but you may over the course of 8 weeks, actually the kids might start to just do it on their own. But it's, oh yeah, woohoo, all right, right on, way to go, thank you, God, whoop, whoop, yeah. All right, so I have a video that I made of me doing it. I put little motions to it, and you can use the motions or not, whatever you want to do. But it is different ways in modern day language to say Alleluia, to say woohoo, right? So that ends everyone. And then it's bookended by an Alleluia, my favorite Alleluia, halle, halle, hallelujah. So as the kids are coming up, and as the kids go back, we've got our halle, halle. Now, it could be any Alleluia, whatever is good for your congregation, but that's my favorite one. So anyway, that's the one that I suggest because it's upbeat, it's easy to learn. If your congregation doesn't know it yet, they're going to love it. All right. So before we get to music, Jenna, I'm going to stop for just a moment and let me know if there are questions related to what we've gone over thus far.
Yes. So we had a very good question in the chat about the videos that you've suggested from the CBS Sunday morning segments, and one person wondering why we can't just share those videos in live stream worship.
Because you might get dinged. You might get dinged in terms of copyright issues. So sometimes when YouTube or other live streaming platforms, Facebook, recognizes something that is a broadcast something like music sometimes, but also videos, if they recognize it, and they have algorithms out there that are noticing these things, they might shut you down, pause it, make it not playable, that kind of thing. Now, I haven't tried this, and maybe what I'll do, maybe what we should do, Jenna, is like start live streaming, play one of them, and see what happens, right? So you may do that on your own and see what happens. So it might be okay, and it might not be okay. So that's why we made these descriptions, these verbal descriptions, so that you could use the story, inspire people by the story, maybe even show a picture, do a screenshot, or use the pictures that we have in the devotional booklet or in the sermon fodder, put that on the screen if you use visuals, and talk about the person's story, and relate it to the scriptures as we have suggested in the sermon fodder, and then invite people to actually watch it later on, make those links available. So that's why. All right.
And there's also someone, Clay shared a link to a form on the CBS website that you can use to request usage of a piece of media.
Okay.
We haven't tried that. We don't know how likely they are to respond for that kind of thing, but that is there as an option if someone wants to try that.
That's right. Great. Thank you so much.
That's all that I see for questions so far.
Okay, let's get to music. Moving right along. All right, here we go. So, music for this series. As always, we create what I call a threshold moment. And that's based on my research and Think Like a Filmmaker when I was studying filmmaking, talking to them about what makes good storytelling. The threshold moment is that moment where the audience, the congregation, is introduced to the theme to the journey that we're going to go on. And filmmakers said that the first 2 minutes of the movie are the most important in the entire enterprise, because either people lean into it or they go, okay, been there, done that, and they lean back and they're not invested in it. And so a threshold moment is like an introit on steroids. Not really, but it's an introit. It is a moment where music and words invite us to deepen into the journey, right? And it's more than a call and response usually, because oftentimes if we just stand and then we do call and response, and it's like something, a call to worship, in the format that we do every week, the brain kind of switches off and doesn't really take in the information. So the threshold moment in this one is a theme song. It is an introduction by the leader, just like a little paragraph. And it is, then I'll show you when we go through the script what happens after that. But we have a threshold song, theme song. Let's just go here. Amanda Udis Kessler is just an amazing songwriter. And I approached her and I said, this is what the series is about. And within days, she came up with this beautiful original song for us called Rise Up in Us. You heard that in the video, but I'm going to play it again. And so you can look on and see the music and see how easy it is. Now, some of you who are in very small churches that with very limited resources, easy, even easy music is not easy because you don't maybe have a pianist. That's why we included recordings for you. We have these recordings, this song, we've got it in 1 time through, 2 times through, and 3 times through. So you can choose how much repetition you want. We're just going to listen to the 1 time through and we'll follow along with the music.
Rise up in us, and we will rise from death into a newfound life, from bondage freed, from harm released, from illness healed as one in peace. When all is lost, our hearts are warmed, our hope restored, our lives transformed. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah.
So short, to the point, really brings the message home. One of the things that I would suggest is if you have a children's choir or time with children, even Sunday school, teach them that little hallelujah at the end so that every Sunday when they hear that come up, they join right in, right? That's something that they can do even without being able to read words. It would be a wonderful thing to then hear everybody chime in on that hallelujah. Now you heard there were some parts there, so there's a choral version that has SATB parts, and I think the recording that's 3 times starts out with 1 voice, then it adds a little bit of choral parts in the second one, and then it adds the organ in the third one. So, you'll figure out how you want to do that with your musicians. All right, so let me go back and hymns and songs, of course. We have suggestions for traditional classical hymns as well as contemporary choices. The Easter Halle Halle we suggest, but of course you can pick whatever Alleluia you want. We have anthem choices for choral, for band. We have prayer song suggestions. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the prayers in just a moment. Communion responses, the communion prayer uses "This is a day of new beginnings" right on the message, woven throughout the communion. So that's there. And a doxology. I love to tell the story because this is about stories. All right. So let me forward here. Okay, there we go. So visuals, I'll go ahead and do visuals. We'll get to questions here in a minute if you have any about music. But visual and media arts ideas, I told you already that anchor image is keys. And I talked about keys with something attached that had a little message, maybe a scripture, whatever it is that you want to put on there. But we found several options. We found options of keys that you can buy, just ornamental keys. They're not real keys, but they're ornamental keys and they're not that expensive. But of course, you could start asking people to dig in their junk drawers and bring you their keys that they don't know what it belongs to anymore, or old keys. And you could actually use those. This is where a small church is an asset because you won't be making a ton of these things and you could probably gather old keys. Go to your hardware store and see if they have any keys that, were rejects from making keys, what have you. but lots of different ways to do that. So we have resources to tell you how to create those kind of giveaways. And you'll want to do that on the first Sunday, especially, or on Easter Sunday when you have the most people. But then have some extras for visitors that might come that don't have it, so that you can always give that out. All right, but there's a ton of other things you're going to probably have fun creating with keys. Oh my gosh, Pinterest has so many ideas for you for making stuff out of keys. You're going to have a blast with this. So think about different groups that might have fun with this. Have your youth pick something that they want to do to create. Just a lot of really fun things. So you could do this throughout the series as well. You could have some crafting days, different things. So just super fun. And of course, we have a board for the series on our Pinterest board, Worship Design Studio Pinterest board. All right, chalkboard prayers. Let me talk about this. One of the things in the scripts that you will find is that during prayer time, you might pray in the way that you're accustomed to, a pastoral prayer or intercessions or whatever you do. But then what we suggest is that you invite people to go to stations, prayer stations, and on there, oh my gosh, I've never heard of this stuff. I've always known that you could use chalkboard paint for walls, but what I found was chalkboard contact paper. Oh my gosh. So I got some and I tried it out. There's a picture on my dining room table and it's so cool. So the idea is that you write things you want to let go of, that you want to have transformed, and we have a different prompt for each week. You could make up your own prompts if you want to. And people go and they maybe write in chalk on there. You could also do this without the chalkboard paper. You could just have people write on an insert, or just think about it, whatever you want to do with that. But the chalkboard paper is super cool. So there's that. And let me show you, I took a little video of me wiping it down with a sponge, and it's actually pretty easy. Takes just a little bit of elbow grease, but you'll see that in the benediction time, I have a time where you could have people who go to those stations, or if you're a small church, you might just have one or two places, and take a sponge. And during the benediction, there's some verbiage about starting anew, starting afresh. And you could just wipe those away as a sign that that is possible when we petition God to help release us from these things. So that's an idea that you could use, that I think is pretty cool material. And a fun, interactive, participatory thing for your services. All right, as usual, we have put together a social media package, thanks to Jennifer Yoakum, our social media creator. And so you can download those for free. In the package, we have those that have our logo on them. Of course, you can always upgrade, pay a little bit more to have just something you could put your logo on. Of course, you can put your logo on with our logo if you want to, but that does take just a little bit more effort. So we just a little upcharge for that. So if posting on social media every day of your series is something that you really love to do, that's available for you as well. And those are always comprised of the scriptures and some of the liturgy, just to keep that in front of people each week. All right, so Resurrection Stories, Unlock Yours, Guided Reflection Journal. We have really enjoyed putting these journals together. And this one, as I have said, has a link to the story. So if you're sending out a PDF, the PDF of these journals, people can just click on the link. But if they have it downloaded printed, you can use the QR code with your phone to open up those links to those stories. And it has just that link to the story and then a journaling prompt based on that story and a question. And so you could, if you wanted to, instead of creating a booklet this time, you could just give out these pages, which would be a front and a back only at worship, for people to use at home, or of course, use it as small group fodder. Let's go on to that. Small group suggestions. We have many for this series. I read this book, Say Yes, Discover a Surprising Life Beyond the Death of a Dream. I think it's really, really good. And it talks in the last chapter, it talks about resurrection. It uses that word resurrection as how we recover from the death of a dream. And that can be anything. That can be a death of an idea that we had about our life that's actually not going to come to fruition. Expectation, the death of expectation, the death of whatever, any transition. And so we have some other books, Brene Brown, Rising Strong. That's a great word for this. This one, Practicing Resurrection, a memoir of work, doubt, discernment, and moments of grace. One called The Third Day by Bishop Tom Berlin. It is actually a Lent series. They've released it for Lent, but in looking at the videos, the DVDs that you can actually get for small groups, and looking at the book, it easily works for this Easter season series. And in his videos, he also talks about stories of resurrection in that. So that would be a wonderful one if you want something with that typical DVD book kind of study thing. We have resources for children, again, focusing on new life, nature, that kind of thing. We have suggestions for going out, planting plants, fast growing plants, make a science station, these things about life that are growing would be a good thing to do in Sunday school or what have you. Resources for teens. That Say Yes book is especially good for young adults, I think, because it's written by one. And there's actually a link to an hour-long video that is this author doing his live presentation. He's an artist, and so he does art during it. But it's very interactive, and I think very appropriate for young adults, teens and young adults. So that's a possibility as well. And so there's some other kinds of things, collaging as a way of thinking about our dreams, our hopes for the future. There's also some suggestions for writing groups, like getting the stories out of people, getting our stories out, writing this book called Writing Alone and with Others. I studied with Pat Schneider, and it's just a wonderful way of low expectation. It's not a writing group where you grade each other or anything. It's just a really friendly way to have prompts and write together and share that. Also, there's a movement called story circles. And a lot of how-to and resources and toolkits. So if you think your congregation is ready, you could have invite people to this experience of learning to tell their stories. You could even have TEDx type talk night, right? Where you share some stories, some poetry, some music, that kind of thing. Some inspirational time where we inspire each other from our resurrection stories. And of course, when we bring up all of these things, all of these hard things, we want to be ready with support group information. So it's super important for us in our preparation for this series to be thinking about what resources locally and, digitally that are out there for people who want some help with their unlocking this their own resurrection and being on that journey. It doesn't happen in one series. It doesn't happen in one Sunday. It doesn't happen in one fell swoop. It's a journey. And so supporting people in that ongoing journey is really important. Okay, friends. And then we always have small group leader scripts. So no matter which resource that you're doing, this helps with an opening, prayer, lighting a candle, setting our agreements, leading the discussion, and then closing it out. So very simple format so that anybody can lead. All right, friends. So adapt. This is really, really important. I'm going to show you one of our scripts and kind of give you an idea of how to adapt. But I'm going to check in first with Jenna. Jenna, anything around music, visual, small group kind of thing before I go into that script?
Yes, we got a question here from Ian. Hello, Reverend Ian, who says, do you have any thoughts about including an observation for Earth Day? That would be week 3 in the year that you're doing this series.
Yeah, we have not specifically incorporated that into the design. I know that happens every Easter series, is that Earth Day is in there. And what I always tell folks as I'm teaching is that our brains love to make connections. So I am guessing that whatever, you look at that week 3, look at what it is. It's going to be the released, it's called released. And so we might, the children's time, the entire series for the children's time is about creation, right? So it could be that you're celebrating and maybe even highlighting Earth Day through those children's times in the service. But also with that theme released, I'm just riffing here now. How are we released from our ideas that the earth is just going to be there and we can just use whatever resources we want for the foreseeable future? That's actually not true. We have to take care of it. We have to start healing it. So yeah, you're going to find ways to do it, but we have not specifically done that, except for, I would say, as I think about the children's time, we kind of did that for the entire series. Yeah. What else?
Awesome. That's all I see for
Okay.
questions related to small groups, and yeah.
Great. Okay, let's do our last thing and then we're out of here. And that is, I'm going to share with you one of the scripts. Let me find it. Here we are. And we're just going to look at it and I'll tell you what I mean by adapt. All right. So this is a Word version. Our scripts come in PDF and Word versions, both, because we always want you to have a hard copy in your computer that is the original. That's the PDF. And then, of course, you're going to make your adaptations on these Word documents. So let's just say, I'm just going to do some scenarios here as we go through. Now, this is the second week of Easter because I always invite you, if the beginning or the end of a series are special Sundays, in other words, well, you know what I mean by that. And this one is Easter and Pentecost. Don't start with that. Start with one of the regular services, because as I teach, you want most of the services to have the same order, the same format, some repeated things, because that's what we humans love in our rituals, is to have new things, but that have those new things repeated so that they feel like they're part of our tradition, right? That's the way that anyway, so start with a regular Sunday and do that, and then make your changes to all the other regular Sundays, then go back to Easter and Pentecost and make your decisions there. All right, so here we are in the second week, the collective story of resurrection. That's the threshold moment. You see that the music begins underneath. The leader has a little intro. Now, if you're doing the second week of Easter and you only did the addendum, you might want to pull some of the language, the language from the Easter one that introduces the series. You want to pull that into the second Sunday, if you know what I mean. So you might make that adjustment here. But one of the ways you're going to adapt, leaders, is you're going to read my words and you're going to say, I would never say it that way. So, and then you would change it the way that you would say it, right? Then we have theme music is sung by choir, ensemble, song leader, congregation. If your congregation is not a singing congregation or sight reading, and we have a melody only thing that you can put in your worship guide so that your sight readers can sing, but you might consider having the first couple of Sundays only the choir singing that theme song to begin with so people can learn it. So you might just say is sung by the choir. And so you'll get rid of this. And then maybe on week 3 or 4, you're actually going to say is sung by the congregation, right? So that's an adaptation. Now, the beginning, in this series, I have taken the post-resurrection story and put it in the very beginning. I've done it this way. We have 2 voices. One is leader, one is reader. Now, you could have more voices. You could split it up so that readers are different voices. If you have a lot of people that you like, it kind of turns into readers' theater, but you could just have 2. And one is at perhaps the lectern on the chancel. And maybe one is in the congregation with a microphone, because the reader is kind of our modern day thoughts parallel to the scripture. So let me give you an example. Leader, they were on the road to Emmaus. The reader, let's just imagine, out in the congregation, stands and says, we travel so many roads, so many journeys in this life, sometimes traveling towards and sometimes away from a life of freedom. All right. Now, you could, if you don't have a microphone that can go out into the congregation and you need for everybody to be mic'd, because you're in a bigger room or you're online and that needs to feed into the sound system. You might have just two people with mics up on the chancel, and that's okay, right? So that's the way you're going to adapt for your context, this kind of thing. Now, another thing I want to say about this is that because there's a lot of content in here, you might want not just usually I say don't put all of the leaders and readers parts in the worship guide. Certainly things like this first part, you wouldn't want that people reading along with that. But because this is so rich, you might have this in the worship guide, right? And in that case, for the worship guide, you might get rid of the thing that says leader readers, right? And just put the words in there. But then, so then it goes on, Jesus came and fell into step with them, but they did not recognize him. We are sometimes so overwhelmed with the struggles of this world that we can't see the companion that walks alongside us, right? So you see how in every week I take a post-resurrection story, I tell the story, the scriptural story, but alongside it, I have a voice that is our voice, because this whole thing is about resurrection is not just about the resurrected Jesus, it's also about our resurrection. So that happens in each one of the services. And then it ends with everyone with a short unison thing. Now, I had started to do a leader doing the line and the readers, like this part being everybody. But friends, it's too many words. And when we read in unison, we take in maybe 50% of what we say in unison. It strips it of its emotion. So I kept the unison part to just at the end so people could soak in that first part. All right. So then we go into the opening hymn or song, and we have Abide With Me, a traditional classical one. And let's say that you are Disciples of Christ Church, and so you're using chalice. So you're going to get rid of all the other ones. All right. And you're just going to have chalice, and you're not doing the contemporary version of Abide With Me. But if you have a contemporary service, or if your musicians are more attuned to contemporary music, it's a band, more of a band instrumentals, then you're going to get rid of that one. And you're just going to have that. And that link goes to where you can get the music for that version, right? So we're adapting for our context. The key to peace, you see how I'm using that anchor image. Know that Christ companions us along this journey. Because of this, we can be honest about our lives, our struggles, and the things that keep us locked up. This is the key to peace. As soon as truth is spoken and the desire for freedom is known, divine love begins the process of resurrecting your life. In the name of Jesus Christ, you can know freedom. And at least in the Methodist tradition, the people say that back to the person who's just said, in the name of Christ, you're forgiven. In this one, we expand that and change that for each one, depending on that theme. And so in the name of Jesus Christ, you can know freedom, back to the leader. Now, if you're a tradition that doesn't do that and you don't want people to say that, you would just take that out, right? And then I would invite the children forward as we sing our Easter season, Alleluia, and pass the peace of Jesus Christ. And make sure you turn around and wave to the people through the camera who are worshiping remotely with us, right? So be sure, you're going to adapt that. If you don't have live streaming, you're going to take that out, right? So you're adapting these scripts for your use. Now, Halle Halle is what we suggest, but you might put a different one there. So you would add that. All right, New Life Happens is the name of the children's time. And we don't put that in the scripts. That's a separate document, just so that the scripts are not so long. So you would do that and Halle Halle back after the children's time. All right, a reading, and the next reading always flows into the anthem or the band song. And so everything we've chosen as anthems and band songs in this series has to do with this reading and about the theme of the Sunday. Then a story of freedom, Paul and Silas in prison. And then we have a reading there, and then into the sermon, which I'm calling testimony to freedom, or testimony to healing, or testimony to release, or testimony to liberation. So you see those change per week, right? Now, if you don't have a choir, of course, you're going to get rid of that. Or if you decide that we don't have a choir, but we want to listen to the song, then you're going to put a directive in here that says, play the video of the song, right? Or play the soundtrack of the song. All right, so always adapting. Prayers of the people. This is, invite verbal prayers in the way that's most familiar to your community. So we're going to put, in our community, it's pastoral prayer. So we would adapt that way. Then invitation to the stations, if you're going to do that. Now, if you're not going to do that, you would just get rid of that whole paragraph and do prayers the way you usually do them, right? So you're adapting. All right, finish with the Lord's Prayer that either comes at the end of the time of going to stations. And in the music document, we have examples of short, repetitive prayer songs that you could sing while people go to stations. And then the Lord's Prayer would be sort of their cue and the musician's cue. Okay, we're wrapping it up. And people go back to their seats and you wrap that up. All right, opportunities to live resurrected. Oh, let me go back here. I put the insert communion here. If this is a Sunday, you celebrate the sacrament. And on this second Sunday, it will be, if you do the first of the month, it will be a communion Sunday. So you would insert from the communion document, and probably instead of prayers of the people, you might do a short prayer before you do communion, pastoral prayer, and then invite people to go to the stations after they come to receive communion, have them go to the stations and back to their seat. So you would write that in there and say, that's the way we're going to adapt that. Offering, we're calling it opportunities to live resurrected. And you might put your announcements in this part of the service, because the way that we are interpreting this is that our offering to God is the way that we live a resurrected Easter life, right? And so that might sometimes, announcements for me can be a floating thing. And if theologically it makes sense in a certain part of the order of worship because of the theme, and that's the way this is, you might want to put that there instead of having an offertory, because you may have had more, your music, your choir may have done a second piece while people are going to stations, or your band. So, but up to you, you get to decide, right, how you're going to do that. And then the doxology, I have suggested that you use one verse of I love to tell the story and the refrain, and let that be your doxology, right? Closing hymn, song, again, a traditional choice and a contemporary choice. And then here's the benediction. And of course, friends, if these, if this doesn't jazz you, if this is not going to be familiar enough to your congregation, I mean, in this series, I have actually picked mostly really familiar things. But if, for instance, God of freedom, God of justice, I say use a familiar 8-7-8-7-8-7 tune. That's a very familiar meter. So you could put those words to something that's more familiar tune to your congregation. But if you don't want to do that at all, you're gonna delete that and you're gonna put in whatever it is that is more familiar to your congregation, especially like Amazing Grace. If you don't have a choir and you didn't do Amazing Grace, My Chains Are Gone, then you could put it in the closing song. But always just look at our choices, because I make them related to the theology, to the feel, for the place in the service, and then make your own choice, kind of keeping those things in mind. The benediction, again, you can wipe clean those chalkboard things if you're doing that. If not, I think it works anyway. Whatever keeps you from the freedom for which you were created can be wiped clean, for we believe our stories can be rewritten each and every day. We know this isn't easy or quick, but let this be a vision of your life resurrected, right? That works even without the chalkboard stuff. But again, we suggest that you adapt any and all these words. All these words, come up with your own series then, but certainly this is your foundation and you change it however you want to. All right. And then we have the suggestion that you sing that theme song, because it's short, one more time at the end as like that benediction punctuation mark, and then postlude. All right, friends, I hope that helps in terms of understanding how to adapt our series. It really is, we want to give you maybe more than you can use, or more than we just give you so much because we're serving churches that are small, medium, large, different denominations, different things, different traditions. And so we want to give you something and then say, please have your way with it. Jenna, are there questions before we close this up?
Yes, we did have a question here about the scripts in general. What is the anticipated time on these services? I think runtime.
Yeah, 1 hour. 1 hour. Even, you know, when you see these scripts, it looks like a lot, but really it's no more than your usual service, right? The opening thing with that reading is call to worship length. There's 2 other readings. If you're a church that needs to shave something off in turn, like maybe one less reading, you're going to decide as a preacher, what are the important readings that I'm going to preach about? And maybe you're going to get rid of one of the readings so you don't have 3 different scripture selections. But I'm pretty adept at creating something that can be an hour. Now, communion Sundays, you're probably going to go over an hour a little bit, right? But these scripts may look like it's a long service, but really when it comes down to it, there's a lot of rubrics in there. That's me talking to you about what you could do that you're going to get out of there, right? And it's going to look a lot more like what you usually have. What else, Jenna?
That's all I see for now.
Great. Friends, thank you so much for coming on for this Get Ready webinar for Resurrection Stories. And my prayer for you is that in this series, you will see people inspired and comforted and encouraged to find new life. My prayer for you also is that you will introduce this on Easter Sunday, either in full or in addendum, in such a way that people who are really needing to hear these messages, hear these stories, be inspired by these stories, will come back and they will hear them. And that people who will never walk through the doors of your church, perhaps what you do is a little library stand outside, you know, the lending library kind of thing. And that you will put some of these, like the devotional booklet, that, you know, you'll find ways to get the message out, maybe on your social media. You know, there's nothing to say that you can't take the link to the story from CBS Morning or whatever that is, and from their source place on the internet, take that link, post it on your social media and say, this is a story we're looking at this week. What do you think? Get it out there. Get the message of hope out there. That is the main thing for this series. And we hope that we can be a help to you in doing just that. Thank you so much, everybody. Many blessings. Bye-bye. Happy Easter.